Two kings met on the battlefield. But the real war wasn't fought with swords or spears. It was fought in their minds. Alexander the Great didn't just conquer Persia. He rewrote reality itself. This is the story of how one man's belief that he was a god destroyed an empire built on divine right. In 333 BC, Alexander of Macedon faced Darius III at Issus. Most historians focus on the companion cavalry charge, the Macedonian phalanx, or the strategic bottleneck of the Pinarus River. But the real battle wasn't fought on the plains. It was fought here, points to head. It was a war between a projected divinity and an inherited one, between a mind that believed itself a god and a mind that merely represented one. Victory would go to the commander who could master not only his own army, but the mind of his enemy. To understand the collapse of the Persian Empire, we must first analyze the two minds at its center. This is the ultimate case of rival minds, not just a contest of generals, but a collision of two entirely different psychological realities. On one side, we have Darius III, the Shahanshah, the King of Kings. His authority was the product of 1,000 years of tradition. He was the steward of a divine mandate, the center of a vast, bureaucratic, and ancient empire. His power was external. It was vested in his title, his throne, and the rigid hierarchies that held his world together. Darius was a paragon, a symbol of stability. But the critical vulnerability of such a mind is its reliance on that external structure. If the symbols of power fail, if the structure itself is threatened, the leader's own cognitive resilience can become brittle. He is a man defined by the right to rule. On the other, we have Alexander. Alexander was not merely a king. He was a self-perceived force of nature, tutored by Aristotle, son of the tempestuous Philip II, and self-identified as the son of Zeus Ammon. His entire psychological framework was built on a foundation of supreme, almost pathological, internal locus of control. He did not just command events. He was the event. Here, we must make a crucial distinction. Alexander's god complex was not simply megalomania. It was his single most effective psychological weapon. It was a conscious projection of will. When he sliced the Gordian knot, he wasn't just solving a puzzle. He was conducting a psyop. He was creating a narrative of inevitability, a story that said, "The old rules do not apply to me." This projection served two purposes. It forged an unbreakable bond of belief with his own men. But more importantly, it was aimed directly at the mind of his opponent. Alexander intuited that the Achaemenid Empire, for all its scale, had a single, catastrophic point of failure: the cognitive fortitude of Darius. Darius ruled by divine right. Alexander ruled by divine will. This set the stage for a new kind of warfare. Alexander would not just defeat the Persian army. He would demonstrate to Darius and to the world that his personal reality was stronger than the emperor's. He would prove that Darius's divine right was a fiction and that his destiny was the only truth. The battle would be fought not for territory, but for the ownership of reality itself. The first test of this psychological war came at Issus. Darius, confident in his overwhelming numbers, had maneuvered to cut Alexander's supply lines, a solid, conventional strategic move. He trapped the Macedonians against the sea, and from a purely logistical standpoint, Darius held the advantage. But Alexander did not analyze the battle in logistical terms. He analyzed it in personal, psychological ones. Contemporary accounts describe Darius positioning himself, as was Achaemenid tradition, in the center of his vast infantry line, surrounded by his elite immortals. This was standard Persian doctrine: the king as the stable anchor, the symbolic heart of his army. This doctrine, however, was a profound psychological miscalculation when facing Alexander. Darius made himself the physical and cognitive center of gravity for his entire force. He was the linchpin. Alexander, upon seeing this, understood the objective instantly. It was not to roll up the flanks or grind down the numerically superior Persian infantry. The objective was Darius. The battle plan became a direct, high-velocity, psychological assault. Alexander formed his elite companion cavalry into a wedge, a spearhead aimed not at the heart of the army, but at the heart of the emperor. The charge at Issus was less a cavalry maneuver than a surgical strike against one man's courage. Alexander, leading from the front as always, projected an aura of invincible, furious determination. He was chaos incarnate, driving directly at the man who represented order. The effect on Darius was profound. This wasn't warfare as he knew it. This was a personal, terrifying violation of the established rules of engagement. When the lines buckled and Alexander's spearhead broke through, threatening his person, Darius did the one thing an emperor god cannot do. He fled. He abandoned his army, his royal chariot, and, catastrophically, his own family, his mother, wife, and children. In that moment, the psychological campaign was won. By fleeing, Darius shattered his own projection of power. His army, seeing the divine symbol of its unity break, dissolved. But Alexander's follow-up was the true masterstroke of psychological warfare. He captured Darius's family and treated them with an almost theatrical clemency. This was not kindness. It was a power move. He was communicating to Darius on a personal level, "I control your army. I control your family. And I control the narrative of mercy. You are no longer a king. You are a fugitive." This sets the stage for the final confrontation, Gaugamela. 2 years later, in 331 BC, Darius had learned tactical lessons. He chose a wide, open plain to maximize his superior cavalry and his new scythed chariots. He had meticulously prepared the ground. From a conventional standpoint, this was the perfect Persian battlefield. But Darius was now fighting a psychological war he had already lost. He was a man plagued by the cognitive dissonance of his first failure, haunted by the memory of Alexander's charge. Alexander, by contrast, was the physical embodiment of his own narrative. His famous rejection of a night attack, "I will not steal. My victory," was pure psychological theater. It was a projection of supreme confidence, a message to his own men and to Persian scouts that the outcome was already determined. At Gaugamela, the pattern repeated, but on an apocalyptic scale. The Persian line was a vast, seemingly impenetrable wall. Alexander's strategy appeared suicidal. He advanced with his right flank, thinning his own center, and drawing the Persian cavalry wider and wider. This was a feint in strength, but its true purpose was psychological. He was forcing Darius to react, to commit his resources, to feel the strain of uncertainty. Then, the decisive moment, a gap opened in the Persian center near Darius. Whether by plan or opportunity, it doesn't matter. Alexander, just as at Issus, pivoted his elite companions and a unit of the phalanx into an angled wedge and charged not at the gap, but through it, directly at Darius's personal position. This is the psychological crucible. For Darius, it was Issus happening all over again, but faster, more violently. The same nightmare, the same demigod, the same spearhead aimed at his personal will. The cognitive load was too much. The emperor's resilience, already cracked, shattered. He turned his chariot and fled. Again, here, we must be clear. Darius did not flee because his army was beaten. His army was largely intact when he ran. In fact, his left flank was winning decisively against Alexander's hard-pressed general, Parmenion. Darius fled because his mind was beaten. Alexander had successfully transformed the battlefield into a personal referendum on their right to rule, and Darius conceded. He had proven that his will was a stronger force than Darius's title. The flight of the king instantly decapitated the Persian army cognitively. An army whose loyalty is centered on a single man cannot function when that man proves himself unequal to the moment. The largest army ever assembled dissolved into a rout, not because it was tactically defeated, but because its psychological linchpin had been pulverized. The autopsy of the Achaemenid Empire is not a military one. It is psychological. What we witnessed at Gaugamela was the final, catastrophic failure of a centralized cognitive structure. The Persian system, for all its immense power, was built on a paragon leadership model. The Shahanshah was the stable, divina center. The empire's satraps and armies were extensions of his authority. Alexander's system was the opposite. His army was a direct extension of his will. Here, we see the profound strategic lesson. Darius's authority was external and symbolic. Alexander's will was internal and absolute. When Darius fled the field at Issus and again at Gaugamela, he did not just abandon a tactical position. He invalidated the central symbol of his entire empire. He personally demonstrated that his divine mandate was a fiction and that Alexander's projection of inevitability was the superior reality. The immediate aftermath proves this cognitive diagnosis. The great, ancient cities of Babylon and Susa, the administrative and economic hearts of the empire, surrendered to Alexander without a fight. This was not a military capitulation. It was a psychological transfer of allegiance. The satraps and citizens recognized that their symbolic center had failed. The empire had already died in the mind of its king. Alexander's campaign, therefore, was not simply a conquest. It was a hostile psychological takeover. He correctly identified that the Persian Empire's center of gravity was not its vast army or its wealth, but the cognitive resilience of a single man. He waged asymmetric warfare against that specific mind. He engineered two set-piece battles designed not to destroy an army, but to break one man's nerve. Darius, trapped in a conventional mindset, was facing an opponent who waged war on a different existential plane. He was prepared for a war of logistics and tactics. Alexander subjected him to a war of pure will. The Persian Empire did not fall to the Macedonian phalanx. It was shattered by a superior psychological profile. Darius III faced a psychological opponent he was not equipped to understand. If you were in his position at Gaugamela, with your conventional tactics failing and your personal will under direct assault, what strategic or psychological countermove could you have made? Or was the cognitive war already lost? Share your analysis in the comments.